On May 22, 2021, a violent and tragic event took place inside an apartment on Saratoga Street in East Boston, Massachusetts. Marco Chulio Flores was charged with the first-degree murder of Jane Galdamez and setting fire to the apartment, a case that quickly attracted significant public and legal attention. Flores pleaded not guilty at Suffolk Superior Court, setting in motion a complex legal battle intertwined with themes of childhood trauma, immigrant experiences, and the search for justice in the face of unspeakable personal pain. This case has resonated beyond the courtroom, shining a light on the often invisible realities faced by abuse survivors in immigrant communities and challenging conventional understandings of culpability and victimhood. The events surrounding Flores and Galdamez provide a poignant window into the complexities of the human condition and the legal system's struggle to balance retribution, rehabilitation, and mercy. Marco Chulio Flores was a young man of Salvadoran descent who had lived in the United States for much of his life. Having arrived as a child immigrant, Flores grew up navigating the dual challenges of assimilation and cultural identity. His background was marked by hardship. According to various reports and court documents, Flores endured sexual abuse over a long period at the hands of Jane Galdamez, someone he knew personally and trusted. This trauma profoundly shaped Flores's psychological state and ultimately influenced his actions on the fateful day in May. In addition to grappling with the scars of abuse, Flores faced the precarious reality of his immigration status, a factor that complicated his legal and social standing. The threat of deportation loomed over his case, stirring intense community concern and advocacy efforts. Jane Galdamez, the victim in this case, was also a Salvadoran immigrant residing in East Boston. He was known in the community and had a personal connection to Flores. While details about Galdamez's background are less documented publicly, it is known that he allegedly sexually abused Flores over several years, a grievous betrayal that set in motion the tragic events that unfolded. Galdamez's role in the community and the nature of his relationship with Flores became central to the legal narrative, as his alleged abusive behavior was key to the defense's argument regarding Flores's motives. On the night of May 22, 2021, Marco Chulio Flores confronted Jane Galdamez inside the latter's apartment on Saratoga Street. According to authorities, Flores came prepared with weapons, including a knife and a dog chain. The confrontation escalated, and Flores reportedly demanded that Galdamez confess to the years of abuse he had inflicted. When Galdamez allegedly admitted to these accusations, Flores reacted violently. Flores bound Galdamez with duct tape and strangled him with the chain. After the murder, Flores set fire to the apartment using charcoal lighter fluid in an apparent attempt to destroy evidence. The fire caused significant damage and endangered neighboring residents, though thankfully no one else was injured. The gravity of the crime shocked the East Boston community and galvanized an intense police investigation. Flores was arrested shortly thereafter and charged with first-degree murder and arson. Upon his arrest, Marco Chulio Flores was charged with two of the most serious crimes under Massachusetts law: first-degree murder and arson. First-degree murder in Massachusetts requires proof of premeditation and intent to kill. The prosecution argued that Flores had planned the murder in advance, bringing weapons and materials to commit the crime. Arson charges were linked to Flores's deliberate setting of fire to the apartment in an effort to conceal evidence and potentially harm others in the building. At his initial court appearances in Suffolk Superior Court, Flores pleaded not guilty, denying the charges while also asserting the abuse he had endured as a critical context for his actions. The legal process ahead promised to be complex, as the defense prepared to introduce evidence of abuse and trauma, while the prosecution sought to demonstrate Flores's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The evidence gathered by investigators played a critical role in shaping the trajectory of Marco Chulio Flores's case. It consisted of physical, testimonial, and digital elements that together painted a complex picture of the events and the people involved. At the crime scene, forensic experts meticulously examined the apartment on Saratoga Street. They documented blood spatter patterns, binding materials, and the ignition source of the fire. The presence of duct tape binding the victim's wrists and face, as well as a dog chain around the neck, was consistent with a strangulation. Experts also confirmed the fire had been deliberately set using accelerants, specifically charcoal lighter fluid, which indicated intent to destroy evidence. Autopsy reports verified that Galdamez died from strangulation, supporting the prosecution's assertion that the killing was intentional and violent. One of the most pivotal moments in the case was Flores' own confession after his arrest. He reportedly admitted to killing Galdamez and starting the fire, but maintained that his actions were driven by years of sexual abuse and emotional trauma. Flores' defense team planned to emphasize this confession in court, not as an admission of guilt per se, but as a context for his psychological state and actions. Witnesses in the neighborhood provided additional testimony about the aftermath of the fire and the reputation of both men, though no direct eyewitnesses to the murder itself were available. Investigators seized several electronic devices from Galdamez's apartment, including computers and smartphones. Examination revealed disturbing material, including images and chat logs that allegedly corroborated Flores' claims of prolonged sexual abuse. These files became central in establishing a motive for Flores' drastic actions. The presence of child P on Galdamez's devices was used by the prosecution to underscore the gravity of the alleged abuse and its impact on Flores, complicating the moral narrative of the case. Flores' defense team adopted a multifaceted approach. Central to their argument was that Flores had endured years of sexual abuse at the hands of Galdamez, a factor that significantly impaired his mental state and capacity for rational decision-making at the time of the incident. They argued that Flores' actions, while legally punishable, were more aligned with a response to ongoing victimization than cold-blooded murder. The defense sought to frame the case as one of vigilante justice, where Flores acted in a moment of emotional and psychological crisis after a lifetime of suffering. Some defense experts planned to testify about the lasting effects of childhood sexual abuse, including PTSD, depression, and impulsivity, which could explain Flores' violent reaction. They also considered arguing for lesser charges, such as manslaughter, on grounds of diminished capacity or provocation. The prosecution, however, maintained that Flores' crime was premeditated and brutal. They highlighted the planning involved Flores bringing weapons and accelerants and the deliberate nature of the murder and subsequent arson. While acknowledging the claims of abuse, prosecutors argued that vigilantism could not be condoned, emphasizing the rule of law and the dangers of individuals taking justice into their own hands. The prosecution sought the maximum penalty allowed under the law, underscoring the severity of both the murder and the endangerment caused by the fire. The psychological trauma endured by Flores was undeniable. Experts in trauma and abuse victimization have long established that childhood sexual abuse can profoundly alter brain development, emotional regulation, and behavioral responses. Survivors often experience intense feelings of fear, shame, and helplessness, which can manifest in various ways, including aggression and self-harm. Flores' case illustrated these dynamics vividly. His years of abuse reportedly created a volatile psychological state, contributing to his eventual violent response. Flores' status as an immigrant further complicated the case. Many immigrants face barriers to accessing mental health care, legal support, and community resources, especially those who fear deportation or stigmatization. The uncertainty surrounding Flores' immigration status weighed heavily throughout the trial. Deportation proceedings after sentencing raised questions about whether justice extended beyond the courtroom to include protection and support for survivors, regardless of legal status. At the heart of the case was the controversial concept of vigilante justice. When official systems fail to protect victims of abuse, some individuals take drastic measures. While legally indefensible, such actions raise moral and societal questions about the adequacy of protections for vulnerable populations. Flores' case became a flashpoint for debates over how society should balance empathy for trauma survivors with the need for public safety and legal order. The East Boston community was deeply affected by the incident. Many residents expressed sympathy for Flores, viewing him as a victim of abuse rather than a cold-blooded murderer. Supporters organized rallies and petitions, advocating for leniency and opposing his deportation after sentencing. This grassroots support underscored the community's recognition of systemic failures in protecting abuse victims and immigrants. Local and national media outlets covered the story extensively. Coverage ranged from factual reporting of court proceedings to opinion pieces debating the morality of Flores' actions. Some outlets highlighted the abuse Flores endured, framing the case as a tragic failure of the justice and social support systems. Others emphasized the brutal nature of the crime and the dangers of vigilantism. The media spotlight also brought attention to the broader issues of immigrant rights, child abuse, and criminal justice reform. The case of Marco Chulio Flores goes far beyond a simple criminal prosecution. It touches on several deeply entrenched issues in American society, the legal system, and public policy. Analyzing these broader implications helps us understand the societal context in which the tragedy unfolded and the lessons that can be drawn to prevent similar outcomes in the future. One of the most contentious issues raised by the Flores case was the intersection of criminal justice and immigration enforcement. After Flores served his prison sentence, he was transferred to an Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE facility as authorities initiated deportation proceedings against him. This sparked significant backlash from his community and immigrant rights advocates. Many argued that deporting Flores, a survivor of abuse who committed a crime under extraordinary circumstances, would be unjust. Supporters feared that sending him back to El Salvador, a country plagued by violence and instability, would effectively punish him twice, once through incarceration and again through forced removal to a dangerous environment. This case highlighted ongoing debates about how immigrant defendants and convicts are treated in the U.S. legal system, especially those who have compelling humanitarian claims or mitigating circumstances. It raised questions about whether immigration policies adequately consider the complexity of cases involving trauma and victimization, or if they disproportionately punish vulnerable populations. Flores' allegations of long-term sexual abuse place the case firmly within the broader context of child abuse prevention and victim support. The tragedy revealed shortcomings in the systems designed to protect vulnerable children and adolescents from abuse and exploitation. Despite increasing awareness about child sexual abuse, many victims continue to suffer in silence due to fear, stigma, or lack of access to resources. Flores' situation exemplified how unchecked abuse can lead to devastating consequences, including acts of violence by those who feel cornered or hopeless. The case underscored the need for improved mechanisms for reporting and investigating abuse allegations, accessible mental health services, and trauma-informed care for survivors, community education to reduce stigma and encourage early intervention. Without stronger protective frameworks, tragedies like this remain possible. The case of Marco Chulio Flores pleading not guilty to first-degree murder and arson in the May 22 killing of Jane Galdamez is not merely a story of crime and punishment. It is a narrative embedded with layers of human suffering, systemic failure, and social complexity. Flores was simultaneously a victim and a perpetrator, shaped by trauma, immigration status, and the flaws of the systems meant to protect him. Galdamez was both a community member and an alleged abuser, whose actions had profound consequences for those around him. The legal proceedings challenged traditional notions of justice, compelling courts, communities, and policymakers to grapple with uncomfortable questions. How should the law treat individuals who commit crimes as a direct result of prolonged victimization? What responsibilities do communities and governments have to support immigrant survivors of abuse? How can society balance punishment with empathy to foster healing and prevent future tragedies? As the court case moved forward, and Flores eventually faced sentencing, these questions lingered, reminding us that justice is not always clear-cut. It is often messy, contested, and deeply human. In the end, the case serves as a catalyst for dialogue about justice, trauma, and compassion. It calls on all of us legal professionals, community members, policymakers to consider how we can create systems that recognize the complexities of human behavior, protect the vulnerable, and uphold the principles of fairness and dignity.